It was never just about spaceships or lightsabers, or the clash of sound in a star-filled sky. It was about myth written in motion, about balance and belief, about ancient echoes guiding modern souls. Star Wars was a religion disguised as fiction, a parable told in galaxies too far to measure. The Force wasn't just energy, it was choice, it was temptation. It was the unseen current beneath every act of defiance and every whisper of doubt. It wasn't explained, it was felt. And in that feeling, we found something eternal, something sacred. But now that silence is gone, replaced with slogans and speeches and scripts to self-aware to breathe, the mystery has been dissected, the wonder turned into content. Characters no longer gaze into suns or silence, they explain themselves away, and the myth begins to fracture. We are told this is evolution, that progress demands we forget the poetry of the past. But there is no growth in forgetting soul, no power in stripping away myth. Star Wars was born in a moment of rebellion and reflection, not in boardrooms or algorithms, but in dreams. Still, something stirs. Beneath the layers of noise, beneath the polish and politics, something ancient waits, not to be rebooted, not to be rebranded, but to be remembered, to be rediscovered, to be told again with reverence instead of revision. In this video, we're going to explore how the Acolyte abandoned that reverence, how it replaced timeless themes with trendy templates, how it traded mythology for messaging, and how in forgetting what Star Wars truly is, it may have lost the very soul that made this galaxy worth believing in. Star Wars was never just lasers and spaceships. It was myth, legend, archetype. It reached into the past to tell stories about the future. It wasn't political, it was primal, about the struggle between light and dark, about destiny, sacrifice, and legacy. The Acolyte promised something bold, a journey into the shadows before the saga began, a glimpse into a time untouched by Skywalker blood. But instead of depth, it gave us detachment. Instead of soul, it gave us spectacle, and not the kind that lingers. Characters speak, but they do not echo. Their words vanish like vapor, never settling into the heart. The story moves, but it does not guide. The Force is present, but it has no pull. No mystery, no weight. It floats above, never grounding us below. Where is the myth? The fire that forged generations? Where is the quiet tension of belief and betrayal? Where is the heartbeat of something ancient made new again? The Acolyte touches the surface, but never descends. It stares at the legend, but refuses to kneel. It could have been something unforgettable, a tale whispered in the same breath as the old tales. But it chose to reframe rather than revere, to preach rather than ponder. And somewhere in that choice, it left behind what made Star Wars matter. Every line feels filtered through an agenda, not a vision, not a voice, not a soul. Dialogue that once felt eternal now sounds like a tweet. Characters that should wrestle with fate instead wrestle with buzzwords. It's not timeless, it's trend-chasing. There is no reverence, only revision. Instead of expanding myth, it corrects it. Instead of building upon it, tears away. And the pieces that remain feel hollow, stripped of weight, stripped of wonder, forced into shapes that no longer belong. We once followed heroes who doubted themselves, villains who believed they were right. Now we follow checklists, shallow archetypes bent to fit a message. Every moment feels manufactured, not earned, not true, just necessary for the script to say what it wants. This galaxy was once alive. Now it's sterile, sanitized, scrubbed clean of danger and doubt. The Acolyte doesn't challenge, it instructs. It doesn't question, it declares. And that declaration comes at the cost of story, of myth, of emotion. It's not that modern voices don't belong. It's that they forgot to whisper through myth. They chose to shout. And when you shout in Star Wars, you drown out the Force, you sever the bond, and leave only silence in your wake. There was once magic in the silence. In the moments between choices, Luke staring at twin suns, Anakin weeping in the shadows of the temple, Leia watching hope flicker and reignite. Star Wars didn't need to explain, it needed to feel. But the Acolyte doesn't wait, doesn't listen. It rushes through the sacred and tramples over the quiet. There's no room for reflection, no pause for truth, only noise, only motion, only message after message. The Force was never just power, it was balance, temptation, sacrifice. It connected us to something greater, something unknowable, something pure. But here, it's just a tool, a convenience, stripped of spirituality, reduced to spectacle. We don't need more lightsabers, we need meaning. We don't need louder music, we need resonance. But the Acolyte doesn't understand that longing. It stares into the well of Star Wars and sees only surface, never the depth that lies beneath. It hurts because we wanted to love this. We wanted to believe that the past still mattered, that the Force still whispered. but instead, it shouts empty words into a void and calls it progress. Imagine if it had worked. If the Acolyte had embraced myth instead of mocking it. If it had journeyed into darkness not to criticize, but to uncover. The High Republic era was fertile ground, untouched, mysterious, full of potential. It could have shown us temptation before Sidious, darkness before doctrine, doubt before dogma, a galaxy uncertain, reaching for the light with trembling hands. A story about belief, not branding, about consequence, not convenience. The Jedi could have been flawed, but wise, powerful, but fallible, not mocked, not gutted, not stripped of their purpose. The Force could have pulsed with energy, not as power to wield, but as fate to follow. Visions of temples lost in snow, whispers of Sith secrets buried in time, reflections of pain and pride tangled in one. This could have been the mythology Star Wars hadn't told yet, the story that lived in the margins, finally given light, but AAW was traded for attitude, reverence for rhetoric, and what could have been holy was rendered hollow. What could have changed everything, chose instead to forget where it came from. There is still time. The story isn't finished. Redemption lives in the bones of this franchise. Star Wars has stumbled before, and found its way back through vision, through honesty, through love. The fans remember what it feels like. The chills of destiny, the ache of loss, the fire of belief. We don't need perfection, we need purpose. We don't ask for nostalgia, we ask for narrative that moves, that stirs, that endures. Acolyte can course correct. It can look inward instead of outward. It can tell a story that honors its ancestors without mimicking them. It can choose myth over meme, spirit over signal, emotion over agenda. The galaxy is vast. The Force is still there, waiting. And so are we. Not as critics, but as believers. Not as gatekeepers, but as guardians of something sacred. Something bigger than trend. Bigger than politics. Bigger than now. And if it remembers that, if it listens again, if it dares to feel instead of speak, then maybe it can find the truth again. The myth again, the Force again. But for now, the Acolyte stands as a warning. Not just to Star Wars, but to all stories born from myth. When you forget what made them resonate, you lose more than fans. You lose soul. You lose eternity. It didn't fail because it was different. It failed because it was hollow. Because it spoke loudly and said nothing. Because it wore the costume, but not the spirit. Because it forgot that Star Wars is not about now. It's about forever. The tragedy isn't the backlash. It's the silence left behind. The absence of wonder, the emptiness where awe used to live. It's a galaxy that no longer hums with destiny, but groans under obligation. And that's the cost of forgetting myth, of abandoning archetype, of prioritizing relevance over resonance. You don't just lose a show, you lose a piece of something eternal, something fragile, something beloved. Because when Star Wars forgets what it is, it doesn't just disappoint us, it disappears. And in that fading echo, all we're left with is what could have been.